I'm excited about this episode of the Elite Recruiter Podcast. I have my special guest, Kalifa Oliver from Kalifa Consulting, who's going to talk to us about how the candidate experience has changed. Now, I know I've been in the game for a while. Actually, I feel like it's way too many years at this point in time. But the market and the candidate experience when I first started recruiting versus the world of TikTok and LinkedIn and all sorts of social media platforms, it has completely changed. So Kalifa is here to talk about this. And real quick, before we get started, Kalifa has such an incredible background. She has worked at multiple Fortune 100 companies, talking about candidate experiences, working as a candidate experience person, digging into the data that goes into the talent acquisition teams. So she's got a world of knowledge and is now an international consultant and executive coach because of all the stuff that she's done before. So Kalifa, welcome to the podcast.
Happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
So how did you even get started in the wonderful world of recruiting and candidate data and all that stuff?
So I think for me, my background is in industrial organizational psychology and people analytics. And so for me, I've always looked at the employee experience across the life cycle, which of course starts from the minute somebody lands in your application pool and your applicant pool. And so for me, it's important to look at the entire employee experience from that moment. And one of the things I tell everybody is that moment when they land in your applicant pool is really, really important. How you treat them, the experience they have, because they're covered by laws immediately. They can sue you if they don't get the job, right? And some people win. So really recognizing that part of the experience. And a lot of times what people don't think about is you always remember your candidate experience. And it always sets the tone for what happens next if you become a hire. Also, if you become somebody who now has to work with that company, then you remember that experience you have. So that candidate experience is a big part of an employer's brand proposition. And I think we don't put enough emphasis on that.
It's definitely, being a recruiter, it's tough keeping up with everything that you're doing, all the managers, all the meetings, all the open recs, the positions that need to get filled, the positions that have hit that 30-day, 60-day mark that need more time. And then on top of that, making sure every candidate has an amazing experience, even the ones that actually don't get the job.
Right, absolutely. The other thing is some of the metrics that have been traditionally used to measure recruiter success are, and I'll put this in the nicest way I know how, trash. They're trash, right? So one of the biggest ones that a lot of companies love to use, and I'm happy there is a movement away from it, is time to fill. There are so many things that can impact somebody's ability to fill a job, including things like their holidays in between. There's a freeze in hiring budget. The hiring manager gets sick, and now your numbers are looking terrible. And what I've seen that do is lead recruiters to do bad things, right? Or I see recs open and close. And sometimes it's not that they're bad people. These people have to survive. This is their job. These are the metrics we're using. And this is across any sort of role and time of somebody's career. If you keep giving them metrics that are stupid and telling them this is a measure of success, then you're actually promoting bad behaviors because you're putting people with their livelihood in a bad spot. And a lot of people are just trying to survive. They're trying to do what they think is best because you're using these stupid numbers and telling them they're real and they're not.
I think one of the funniest things is when I went internal, being an agency recruiter to going internal, one of the metrics that they would constantly ping me on was time to fill.
Oh my gosh.
And I've worked in the cleared space, so people, clearance crossovers take so much time. So technically, it could be 6 months. I can have the person in a week, but it could take 6 months before the person starts. And I would get hammered and compared against these recruiters doing commercial work. They're like, well, why are you failing? And I'm like, I'm not failing. I'm doing my job. What do you want me to do? Quit and go somewhere else?
Exactly, right? And sometimes when you are so focused on time to fill, you don't get the best candidate. You don't get the best person because you go with whoever will say yes first. You go with whoever has the time to schedule interviews first, right? You don't get the best pool because you are busy rushing, playing with numbers. And I think that is lesson for the entire candidate and the entire employee experience, right? We have to get away from just seeing people as numbers. And I think while I work with data, I believe, and this is the box I'll stand on, my soapbox that I'll stand on. People need to be seen as people and treated as people. And every data point, I work with data. I have a responsibility when I do people analytics to recognize that every data point is a human being. And we've got to move away from this element of these are just numbers. It doesn't work that way. There's too much complexity in how we create our processes and how we create our programs to go to these are just numbers, because we're seeing the repercussions of making those type of decisions right now, right? We're seeing people will move away. We're seeing that people are really just fed up with the entire process of selection, the entire process of just being in corporate America right now. We're seeing the pushback on return to work. We're seeing people paying attention to compensation numbers and equity and even DEI. We look at those things and it starts again at the candidate experience, because we're starting them off as saying these are just numbers. And then we make recruiters feel like numbers. And so what they're doing, they're treating the candidates like numbers. We got to get away from that, because regardless of what technology comes, we're still humans. And there is a way to humanize all of our processes. And we're really suck at it. We need to do better, okay? We need to do better than that.
Now, when you talk about bringing the human back into the this whole process, much of the time it starts at the top with the leadership.
Yeah.
And not every single leader I've seen is always open to new ideas. They're under the pressure of something else. So if you're a recruiter, a frontline recruiter actively doing the work, you want to really bring the people experience back into the process yourself and make the change where you're at. And we'll separate this on agency and internal. As an internal recruiter, what are some of the things that you could do to humanize this experience again?
I think one of the things that recruiters are not, and talent acquisition as a function, they're not involved enough. And again, this is often no fault of their own. It's because organizations are too siloed. The technology that's being used, have you seen ATS systems? They're terrible. Most ATS systems are awful. As an analyst, when I pull data out of it, I want to scream at how noisy these systems are. Most are not implemented well, right? So you sold a bill of goods from a vendor that this is a really good ATS system, but that's at an optimized state, not at a state that has been implemented in. And the problem too is often talent acquisition is not at a table when we are trying to decide what systems need to be implemented to begin with, right? So that's crazy to me. We're not at a table enough. I think the other thing is we really need to start, and I've had these conversations with leaders, and I'm starting to have more of these conversations, recognizing that the candidate experience and the employee experience, that is tied to your bottom line. It is part of your employer brand. It is a part of your employer value proposition, right? And younger generations are not playing with us no more. Younger generations are not playing with us. They don't wanna just work for the money anymore, and they don't just want to work for the name anymore. That's going away, right? Because I think how people are starting to value work as a part of their lives and experiences as a whole, it's evolving. And we're seeing the fight between generations. And I'm one of those people who, a lot of generational differences are false. If you look through generations, you see the same thing. My generation was better than your generation. Your generation is lazy, blah, blah, blah. We see the same things. But there is a clear distinction between millennials and Gen Z and what has happened before. And it's the burgeoning of technology and information that they have and access that they have and the interaction they have with other people. And it's going into, well, why would I want to work for you? I don't understand why I would want to work for you. I would rather have a balance in my life that I could control than working 27 hours a day for you, right? And I didn't make a mistake when I said 27. Companies act like they want that you are my whole life. And I think we've got to move away from that.
I think that's what's kind of funny with, I was slow to jumping on the TikTok bandwagon, but as soon as I started actually hopping on TikTok, I started seeing people talking about their jobs, talking about their income, talking about the stuff. And I remember when I was out of college and LinkedIn only had 2 million people on it. like I didn't know what the rest of the world looked like. I didn't know what, other recruiting firms were. Like, I'd be in the office at like 7 a.m. and I'd leave at like 9 or 10 p.m. And I
Right.
just thought that was
That's
everybody else.
normal, right? That's no. Listen, I confession. I also absolutely refused to use TikTok for a long time, right? As I've started to do more brand work with my business, like my business manager was like, "You got to get on there." I'm like, "No, please don't make me get on there." But I finally did get on there. And in the beginning, you clutch your pearls, right? Because I'm like, I am, again, they call me a geriatric millennial, which I hate, right? So I'm at that tail end. So I was there at the beginning of the technology shifts, the computers that came in. And then I'm listening to the candidness on TikTok that is so different from what you see on LinkedIn, right? LinkedIn, everybody's polished, everybody knows everything, everybody's an expert at everything, People move from being lawyers to political analysts all in like the space of a week, right? But you go on TikTok and there's this genuineness, and then you start having conversations with younger generations just as a whole, and there's this authenticity, and you hear them being very direct about work. And I clutch my pearls because it's so anti everything I've been taught, right? It's anti the polish, it's anti the LinkedIn. But then I find myself going, yes, we need to challenge this system. HR, for example, is a dinosaur. COVID probably moved HR from the 1930s to like the 1980s. We're still not quite in 2020 anything with HR, right? But it pushed us there. And now we're seeing the pushback to that. But I think what companies are realizing right now is this group, this new workforce, this new pool of people who are now making up the majority of your workforce, the people who are going to do your day to day, they're not the same people that you could have told work all day and this is normal. These people are like, why? And if you force me to do this, I'm going to pull out my camera and I'm going on social media and I'm going to ask everybody if this is normal. And I will embarrass you. You know what I mean? And I think it's a jolt to the system of people who didn't have that technology, who didn't have that access. And it seems bold and it seems crazy. But sometimes you need that type of jolt to your system that makes you go, It's called accountability, which I don't think we've had in our system from candidates for a long time. I don't know, like on TikTok, one of the things I've been looking at lately is the candidate experience people are having. Oh my goodness. And I've started to see it come into LinkedIn where people are starting to talk about how tough the experience as a candidate is. And I've been in the market and I'm like, what is this? And I don't blame the recruiters. We got rid of so many recruiters. Now you're asking one recruiter to fill like 19 positions. Of course, they're not getting back to the candidates. They don't have time. They can't keep their head above water. They have a horrible ATS system to work with, right? And they're working with this metaphorical gun to their back because we just get rid of talent acquisition folks on a whim right now. So I'm like, it's called accountability and I'm loving every moment of it, Make
Yeah,
the
that
mess be accountable.
that really has been like the thing like in 2023, like after the last 2 years, like internal talent acquisition teams are just growing like crazy. And now it's just like you see the stories nonstop of like recruiters are, few hundred applications in, or ones that have even got jobs, jobs just magically disappeared.
Just disappear. It's insane. And like I even look at the wave of how recruiting is working right now, right? That's very different from anything I've ever seen before, where suddenly there are jobs and it looks like things are getting better. And then like Meta has layoffs or Amazon has layoffs, and then you just see this dip. And it's like these companies are just taking cues from each other. And then you see a next wave of layoffs, and it's usually in the talent side. And it's a message that keeps being sent, right? You start getting rid of the people who take care of your candidates. You don't understand what you're saying, right? You are saying that these people, these doulas, these people who bring people into your organization, the first human these people interact with are not important to you. You're telling me already that there is nothing about people that's really important to you, right? You're telling the people who will come into your organization, figure it out. That sets the tone for the entire experience somebody's probably going to have. And I tell people, like, I can tell you that my best recruiter, love her still, the worst organization I've horrible organization, but I would still work with her to get a job. Best experience. And I will tell you, because my experience was so good, I think I coped a lot better with the absolute BS that organization was, because I told myself there is no way they could have such a fantabulous person, you know, working for this company and bringing in people and such a fantastic recruiting process. There must be more to this. They must be trying to do better, right? And then, like, one of my absolute worst experiences was actually with one of the best companies, but because I don't think I had the best experience in that company, because you're always constantly waiting for the shoe to drop, because you have not recovered from how terrible the candidate experience was. You keep waiting to see, like, there has got to be, it can't be that bad from the beginning, right? It's like my trauma began there, and like now I'm waiting every minute to see what happens next, and then I justify, well, you should have known kind of thing. So I'm like, the candidate experience sticks with people, and it's so important, but we treat it like it's just another thing to do, which is unfortunate.
I almost feel like a lot of companies need like a person just to work on the candidate experience. But for that one recruiter that was amazing at the company that just sucked, what did that recruiter do for you that made the difference?
She treated me like a human. Like, I felt so special. I felt like one of the things that she had done sometimes is there was nothing that was needed or due, but she would check in and say, I haven't talked to you in a while. Is everything okay? Is there everything you need from me? And it was never necessarily about us talking about the job or talking about the process. It was her checking in on me and seeing if everything was okay. And she's like, I'm about to sign off. I'm just checking to see if anything is going on. And she kept me updated on the process, right? So even during that process, I'm like, would I get this job or not? I feel like I understand what's what's happening with the process, right? And you don't realize in that process how good it makes you feel. Like, there are recruiters who will call me and I go, oh God, no. But she'd call me and it felt like I was talking to a friend, or we'd shoot the breeze about all these other different things before we even got to, we'd be at the end of the conversation. She's like, oh, by the way, you're supposed to hear from the manager like in a week or so. And I was like, oh yeah. I mean, that is the reason she called. But at the end of the day, we were just talking about fun stuff, and in that moment, it felt like I feel seen. And I think the majority of people just want to feel seen, right? The process of job searching is not good, right? It's not, people don't like changing jobs. It is a weird thing that people say people don't like changing jobs. People love to change jobs. People don't really like job hopping. People like stability. The human condition really likes stability. And the job search process is an exercise in vulnerability that I don't think people realize. And that's one of the things that is really unique to this workforce and this market right now. We've had a massive ton of people who've been laid off. A massive group of people who've just been traumatized. They worked for companies they thought they loved, that did not love them back, that told them they were a family, and then send out an email to let them know that they were laid off, who broke promises to them. And these are new candidates who were recruited, loved on for a period of time, new grads who came out of school, only to be told a day, a week before they were going to relocate and start their lives with this company, say, we don't have a job for you anymore. We have to rescind this offer. That is so traumatizing that I don't think people recognize it. That now I have got to go into this process. My whole life depends on this. This is part of my identity. And I've got to constantly tell this recruiter why you should hire me, why I don't have that job. Think of any trauma that you may have experienced in life. somebody keeps telling you to explain and justify why they should give you a chance, right? That is a trauma. It's constantly traumatizing experience. I've been through it. I got laid off twice in a year, and you're like, you start thinking, is it me? Am I the person, right? Is it me? What did I do wrong? I remember one of the best pieces of advice that I got, I remember the first time I got laid off, is my ex-manager had said to me, your mind is going to play tricks on you for a few days or about a week. Don't lean into it. Your mind is going to, and you think, my mind is not going to play tricks on me. I know this is not me. I know it was a financial decision. But then I woke up the day after being laid off, and I tell everybody, for me, I think the day after was the hardest day, not the actual day of layoff, the day after. When I woke up, and for the first time in my adult life, I was not working. I did not have a job. I'd never experienced that. And my mind did start playing tricks on me. I started to replay every single thing in my head. What did I do? What did I do wrong? Like, did I speak up when I shouldn't have? Was I too authentic? Like, was I a stereotype? You start thinking that, and you have to have these messages that push back. So you imagine me going into the job search thinking that. So now I'm talking to recruiters, and I am now shrinking back into myself because I'm like, my livelihood depends on this, and I must have done something wrong. And here's this person saying, so why should we hire you? Why is there this gap in your resume? I remember there was this one time I got so tired of the question, I said, I didn't want a gap on my resume. I was given a gap on my resume. You know what I mean? So I think recruiters have to take a very different approach, recognizing that gaps don't mean the same things anymore. Remote work don't mean the same things anymore. Like, people are now taking intentional career breaks because people are burnt out. People are exhausted. People have been traumatized. This is like massive breakups, right? That people are seeing. I think recruiters also need to discourage people from going on LinkedIn and putting X this company, X that company. I know it's a beacon, but it's traumatizing, and they don't really see it, right? Like, it's a form of trauma. It's like you broke up with your husband or your wife or your boyfriend, and I'm like, Chris's ex up there, like, on my profile, like, I'm on a dating profile, I'm like, Chris's ex up there. It's weird, right? Like, are we searching for Chris's ex? Is that what we're doing? So it's a new day. It's a new day, and I think recruiters have a new responsibility now.
Well, for many of those, especially in the talent acquisition space that were impacted, your identity is one attached to what you do for a living. Your identity also becomes like the organization that you spend the most time with. So it's hard to quickly shed that identity to try to work on building out a new identity.
Exactly. And it's so tough. And I think, and recruiters themselves are I want to make this clear. Recruiters are super traumatized now too. Right? Because a lot of recruiters who are left in the organization or who have decided to go out on their own and do external recruiting, they are also traumatized from having to deal with what happened. They had to call candidates and say, we're sending your offer, not the people they taught making the decisions, right? They're the grounds crew. They're the ones who have to go in and say, I'm sorry, like, we don't have a job for you. I'm sorry, this froze. I'm sorry, you didn't want getting all the backlash because you've ghosted folks, right? When you didn't want to ghost anybody, you have no information. And the other thing I thought I saw this happen the other day. A recruiter got called out for ghosting a candidate, and he was getting murked on LinkedIn until it got tagged, until that recruiter had to come in and said, I was laid off. I didn't want to ghost you. I was laid off. I don't have a job anymore, right? And I'm like, could you imagine finding out that you were being dogpiled on for trying to do your job when you've lost yours? That's crazy. It's tough.
Yeah. I always stay away from the ghosting conversations on LinkedIn. I'm like, I know every recruiter unfortunately has ghosted somebody, and every now and then I see a recruiter that like in the years ago ghosted me, talking about how they never ghosted people, and I'm like,
Right.
I'm like, I personally won't go out there and say that because I'm not a perfect person, but
Right. Right.
I will say I kind of, I think that's one thing that we definitely don't talk about in the recruiting space and even the HR space is like the trauma of actually resending somebody's offer. I remember, like probably a good decade ago now, I got gave an offer to a candidate. It was supposed to be a senior HR leadership position. I went on vacation. The whatever high up person on the HR scale called me up on Christmas Eve while I was gone on vacation and said that you need to pull this person's offer and tell them that it's being rescinded. And I was like, why? And they're like, well, it's just budget. And I'm like, can I wait till like after Christmas? And they're like, no, like if you don't do this, it's your job on the line. I was like, well, on vacation, make the call, she's crying, I'm crying. And, fast forward a week and a half, back in the office, they're like, oh, can you give her a call? We found the money for the budget. We want to bring her back. And, and I'm like, could we have just literally figured out the budget before we even started this process?
Oh my gosh. Can we?
Oh yeah. She ripped me a new one. She cussed me out. She was just like, you completely ruined my Christmas. I'm like, I know I'm the one that made the call. I'm not the one that made the decision.
Exactly. And it's a working in talent acquisition is truly a shoot the messenger process, and I think like in any other career, any other group of professionals, they're good recruiters, they're bad recruiters, right? They're new recruiters, they're older recruiters, they're experienced recruiters. I still roll my eyes every time I hear super experienced recruiters say, oh, I go through 100 resumes and I know quickly who's going to be great for the job. No, you don't. No, you don't. Right? You don't. Because people are evolving, skills are evolving. So the information that you learned that you thought made somebody really good for a job may have changed, right? There are new skills, there are new people, there are people you're only judging based on what you know. Right? So you have this whole range restriction of people you do not know who could have been successful that now you've created a whole new bias in your head, and I roll my eyes. And then there are really good recruiters who are trying to fight against those recruiters. And those fights on LinkedIn is usually where I get my popcorn and just go, we're just going back and forth. That's just fun. Right? It's just, I think talent as a whole is just it's a form of crisis. There's a little bit of an identity crisis right now as to what talent is, because I think we spend so much time in corporate functions being so financially driven and making finance-centered design to everything that it no longer makes sense, because we have over-architectured everything. That's not how people work. You cannot over-architect your systems for people. You have to have some level of flexibility, right? So in the example you gave, honestly waiting to see if there was a budget that would be approved at the end of the year would have been the right thing to do, right? But there's also no accountability, because this person could have put in a notice. This person could have taken themselves out to a fancy dinner, as they should, to celebrate something new. Right? And this person has to now decide whether they want to come into this company that did that to them. What is to say that you're not going to do the same thing the minute something goes wrong? And we're seeing that happening now, right? The minute something goes wrong with the companies, sales is getting slashed, right? Recruiters are gone, right? Things are looking good. Oh, let's grow the recruiting function to over 100. And then there's no accountability about how to do this better. And we can't. We have so much data, which drives me crazy. We have so much data, right? Just sitting there, just chilling, just waiting for somebody to come swim in it. I've gone into organizations to consult, and I'm like, well, what data do you have? We have all this data, but we haven't done anything with it. And when I mean they have all this data, I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, my nerd alert, I am on fire Like all of this data. Now a lot of data needs cleaning. So hire people to clean your data, right? Hire people like me who will love to backstroke in that data, right? And they don't do that. And it's nuts to me because I see the same leaders go on podcasts, go on TV, go on town hall meetings and say, I love data and I make data driven decisions. How? How are you making data driven decisions? A lot of these layoffs that happen right now, a lot of these offers that were rescinded, I could have told you 4 years ago that trying to grow headcount and looking at total revenue and not looking at profit was going to lead to something like this. Overhiring means that you are going to have to reduce headcount. Layoff shouldn't be a strategy. Layoff should be a last resort, right? You did some bad forecasting, and here we are. It's crazy to me.
I think the point in time where I started realizing something was wrong, I heard that like Peloton was bringing, and this is Peloton, like the stationary bike company, was bringing on entire classes of recruiters at the same time and onboarding them all at the same time. And like, I hate to say this, I'm like, what are they all hiring out for? And it's just like, it kind of goes into your thing. Like these people change their entire lives for an opportunity that, many of these companies, if they just were smart, planned better, and not made data driven decisions and not emotional, like, well, let's just staff up 40%.
Right. Right. We could, slow growth is fine, right? And it's because there's too much emphasis on quarter to quarter wins, right? And here we are, right? There were companies still making decisions on COVID. Oh, we've got more sales than COVID. Yeah, everybody was home. Your forecasters should have factored in what happened years prior, and how would that, you know what I mean? Simple statistics, things regress to the mean. Simple statistics. We don't even got to be fancy here. We don't got to go to AI. We don't got to go to nothing else. Simple statistics. Things regress to the mean. The more data you have, the more likely things are to regress towards the mean. So if you're making a decision in a point in time where things are an exception, everything is in a case of exception, then your forecaster needs to be laid off, not the other people. Your forecaster is wrong, right? How they still have their job, right? It's nuts to me. And so we've created this entire candidate pool full of fear. We've broken our selection systems. One of my new peeves is everybody's like, you need to network more, because you see a lot of that now where people are like, I'm looking for a job, I've been looking for a year, it's tough. And they're like, well, you really need to network more. Stop it. Networking is one thing, but stop telling people to keep networking because you don't want to fix your broken selection system. You don't want to decide your budget and keep the budget and make sure the budget is there. We can't keep talking about ghosts. Stop working with ghost money. Where's the budget? Does the budget actually exist? Can you afford this role? Should we be recruiting for this role? Right? You're essentially putting out these ghost positions just to see what the pool looks like. That is not cool, and it's not okay. You cannot keep treating people like that, and you're going to see the pushback, and we're seeing the pushback. We're creating a bunch of noise in the candidate system, right?
Well,
and it's not cool.
I got another question before we jump over to the next part of the podcast. So has like processes like Indeed Quick Apply hurt the candidate experience? Yes, it's made things easier, but I'm seeing a lot of, at least on LinkedIn, people talking about jobs that have like 8,000 applications in one day.
Oh, yes, they have. They've hurt the system in two ways. One, they're often not the real way the recruiting is happening, right? It's just a way of collecting data, and a lot of recruiters don't check, nor do they have time to look through 8,000, right? You have enough people learning how to beat these systems, which is why I'm not that worried about AI. I'm sorry, I'm not that worried that technology is going to be the be-all and end-all, because people still need to be discerning about what it is that you look like, right? Efficiency doesn't always mean progress, right? Efficiencies mean that now we have figured out a new balance in order to get things done better, right? So that's the first way. The second way is scams. There are burgeoning employment and recruiting scams. There's so much scams on LinkedIn right now. So much scams on Indeed right now. I mean, people are really leaning into people's vulnerability right now and their desperation to find a job. I mean, people who probably believe themselves to be smart and discerning and probably are under desperate circumstances in an inflated economy trying to pay bills. Here comes this person trying to collect your data. Oh, we have a job for you. We're going to send you your laptop and stuff. We're going to send you a check. Go ahead and deposit it. Go ahead and send us money here. You're not thinking. A lot of these people are young. They're not thinking. They're desperate. Scams everywhere. Just wasting folks' time. Easy apply. Like, how did you get on LinkedIn scamming folks? Like, just scamming folks. If you look at a lot of jobs now, they have that whole thing. Like, we understand that there's scams now using our company name, right? So, scams. And it's making it easier. Because now you get those 8,000 applications, right? Now LinkedIn is saying, oh, this is a hot job, right? Indeed is saying this is a hot job. It's made it terrible. Just a terrible experience. It's awful.
I just remember seeing a recruiter on LinkedIn that she said she shut off her applications. Like in one day, she had over 1,000. And she was trying to be open and honest about, like, you know, transparent about the process. Like, hey, shut it down, this and that. And like, I feel bad. She was trying to do the right thing. And by being transparent and talking about that and like, hey, here's how many I went through today and stuff like that. And she just got reamed. Like she became the bad guy on LinkedIn.
Right.
I was just like, I saw that. I was like, I appreciate what you were trying to do. But
right, you're the face of the experience. And I think that goes to your point. In that moment, she became the face and the voice of the bad experience that people were having. Right?
Yep.
Like there was another one that I saw, Paul LinkedIn, we're like picking on them, but that's where everybody goes to be experts. But like there's another one I saw where they talked about stop shooting your shot. Like stop it. Like stop applying for all these jobs that you don't think you're even remotely qualified for. And I'm like, ma'am, chill out. The reason that's happening is because a lot of these jobs and a lot of the people who are getting into the roles, when they look at the job and you look at the person, you go, how? How did that happen? Right? Because somebody shoot their shot and now you're sending mixed messages, right? Because they're like, you mightn't qualify for everything here, but try, right? And ever so often you have a recruiter in your inbox saying, hey, have you thought of this job? I remember there was one recruiter that got in my inbox talking about making games. Me? Designing a game? How? Right? How did my profile even suit somebody who wants to design games? And you thought that I was a good person to source, right? So people are desperate. People want jobs. People want a shot. People want a chance. And that's the message we've sent for so long. So for you to go and wag your finger at people who are like, well, I think I meet some of this criteria, right? I think I meet enough of this criteria that I could apply for this job. Then you go scold them and tell them don't do it. Of course everybody's going to be mad at you. Sit down, chill out, don't scold. Like this goes back to the experience people are having. Recruiters are often facing a backlash to the experience people are having as a whole. And the experience people are having a whole on this market right now is tough. And recruiters right now are being eviscerated when they're not the decision makers. They are, again, the doulas of the organization. Their job is to bring people in and source people and help them through it. But now they're being the person who gets beat up. They're the messenger who gets shot. And it's unfortunate, but it also means that there is a lesson in the system that we need to fix something right now. We need to fix processes, pipeline, policies. We need to get more of talent acquisition to work with HR in a different way, right? We need to evolve HR as a whole. We need to get leaders to stop seeing HR as a necessary evil in organizations, which is a whole lot of podcast. But
awesome. Well, we're going to jump over to the next part of the podcast, the quick fire questions. What advice, with all the data that you've seen, the recruiters that you've interacted with, what advice would you give to a brand new recruiter that's actually just getting started in this industry in 2023?
that the candidate experience matters, and to really see people as people. So look at your process and how you do the process, and look at the design elements of your process and question things, right? There are things that you'll have control over that you can change, and there are things that you can't, right? You can't necessarily change the fact that this hiring manager does not seem to know their job and is not answering your emails fast enough, and you can't get the information you need, right? But you can communicate a little bit better with the candidate, right? You can sympathize and and empathize and talk to the candidate and really focus on the human element of it, right? I think we have to really think about the design of the process that we have control over and start there, because the more you start thinking of the people centering of the design of everything you do, it becomes like a muscle, a reflex that you do, and you become better, right? And that is translatable to get you to move not just through talent acquisition, but if you wanted to transition to sales, if you wanted to transition to HR, the other parts of HR, if you need, that will help you, and that will definitely help you strengthen your skills as a leader in due time. So people center your designs. Really think about, if I do it this way, how does that affect this group of people? And is this the right decision, right? And recognize too that you often know more than the hiring manager. I know that sounds weird, but you often know more than they do. And so don't just let them tell you what they need. Have a discussion with them about how to make this entire process better for everybody.
Phenomenal. Has there been a book that has had a huge impact on your career?
You're going to laugh at me, but don't laugh at me. So a long time ago, I'm going to date myself, but a long time ago when I was doing advanced levels, Cambridge advanced levels, I had to read a book called To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee, right? And in it, and this has always stuck with me, I probably read this book I studied this book, I think when I was like 17, 18. And in it, Atticus talks about empathy, right? He talks about like walk a mile, put on those shoes and walk a mile in those shoes. And I think when I look back now, I realize why I'm so much of an advocate of people-centered design and empathetic leadership and recognizing data as humans is because of that. The idea that before I make a decision, before I make a judgment, before I go with a process, the reason why I want to make work better, the reason why I believe that everybody could have a good experience at work, outside of work, is because you sometimes have to stop and take a walk in somebody else's shoes. It doesn't have to affect me directly, and I can't ever be so narcissistic to believe that I know what everybody needs and I know the experience that everybody is having. I need to walk a mile in their shoes. Now, don't get me wrong. Some people, I walk in their shoes, but I don't care what they got to say. I don't care. There's some things that are not, they're not a question to me. They're not a debate to me, right? Like people's right to exist is not a debate to me. I could recognize that's your opinion. I don't have to care. But I can treat you as a human, and I can treat you with respect, and I can choose to ignore you. I can choose to ignore you, right? Because I can change your mind. But I think that was the book. Now that I look at it, I think it through. That was the book that made me really ground in people.
What has been a big part of your own personal success?
Humor. Something, I love to laugh. People who get to know me well enough know I'm a complete clown. Like, I love to laugh. I'm always cracking up. I love to, I'm not a comedian. Don't get me wrong. My husband will let you know I'm not that funny, although my kids think I'm hilarious right now. But I believe that humor disarms, and humor forces conversations, right? It allows us to be vulnerable in that moment, right? Humor sometimes just sneaks up on us. And so I recognize that a lot of what I do is boring. I work with data, right? A lot of what I do is not sexy, because when you work with data and you do HR stuff, a lot of it is process driven, a lot of it is transactional. But I do believe that I can tell stories with the data. I do believe in the outcomes. I do believe that I can make people feel comfortable. I do understand that people are intimidated by data. You can make people comfortable in any room. And so I think for me, it's just, let's have a laugh. Let's just relax. Let's just chill out. So I think that's where I am.
Oh, and this is my favorite question, Khalifa.
Uh-oh.
Like everything that you've learned, your ups, downs, the data that you've gone through, the experiences. If you could sit down with yourself and have a cup of coffee with yourself when you're just starting out your career, what advice would you give yourself?
That the meritocracy is a lie. It does not exist. So don't be so hard on yourself. I spent a lot of time in my career shrinking, didn't want to be smart because if I didn't want to intimidate, right? Because people, I even had feedback like, she's so smart, and I'm like, so you shrink, right? You shrink in your career because you don't want to be the stereotype in your room. I'm constantly like an only in a room. Don't be intimidated by all the rooms. And the rooms that you're super intimidated by, ask yourself if you need to be in that room, right? Is that the room for you? A room shouldn't terrorize you to be in, right? And so I think I did that for a long time in my career. In fact, I used humor in the earlier part of my career to shrink, right? I want to make you comfortable, but I realized as I grew in my career that I shouldn't create my own discomfort with the sole intention of making people so comfortable that I had to tell myself, don't be too smart. Don't be too, don't be the person in the room who's seen, because I want them to listen to what I have to say. And so don't shrink. Take up the space in the room and figure out if that's a room that you want to be in. It took me too long in my career to figure that out. And so that's where I am now. So now when I laugh, I laugh for my soul now. Like I'm laughing not to shrink. It's still to create comfort. But it's not to say that I'm not smart. I'm gonna tell you about them data numbers and still crack a joke with you. You know what I mean? Like lean into those things that make you strong. And lean into those vulnerabilities because they make you stronger in the long run. But, decide whether those rooms are really the rooms you want to be in, I think.
Phenomenal. Definitely phenomenal advice. Well, Kalifa, before I let you go, is there anything else that you would love to share with the listeners?
I want to reiterate that every data point in HR, in recruiting, is a person, and we really are dealing with a different group of people, traumatized people who've been through a pandemic, people who've been through layoffs, people who've seen their companies fall out of love with them, seeing people leaders who call them family break out with them and be just fine with it. And so I think we really have to be more careful about how we really look at the candidate experience. And my message for leaders is to really think about your employee brand and your employee value proposition now, really through the lens of candidate and employee experience. It's so important. I think if nothing else, I want to leave that. Just recognize that there are traumatized people who are going into organizations now, leading other people, and there are traumatized leaders who are now perpetuating that trauma. And we can do better by recognizing it and calling it out and creating more people-centered design systems, policies, processes, pipelines to help it. We're not so far gone that we can't fix it. We're in a good time to do it. So that's the info I want to leave.
Awesome. Well, definitely thank you so much for joining the podcast today, talking about the candidate experience, talking about how we can elevate the candidate experience, and just re-highlighting people matter, and every data point that you're dealing with is a person's entire life.
Their whole life. I think that's so important. I can't even stress that enough. It's like the biggest thing I think I tell people now. But I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And thank you for coming on and sharing. And for the listeners, guys, until next time, thank you.